Sometimes, horror isn't a monster in the basement or a shriek that pierces the midnight silence. Sometimes, it's about what we fail to notice in ourselves. Hello, friend, and welcome back to Torches, Yoga, and Mindfulness. I'm Lauren, and today I have for you the latest installment of our Mindful Horror Anthology series, Stillness in the Dark. Today's story explores what happens when awareness falters. Mindful skill number 5 is about being able to notice what's happening inside and around us without being swept away by it. We notice, we appreciate, we grow, and we let go. But what happens when we don't let go? Our character in today's story, Theo, he lost his anchor. So, sit back and let me tell you about his descent. Theo woke up in the back seat of his own cruiser. He first noticed how cold his hands were. His left hand clamped around a pair of handcuffs with dried blood crusted into the hinges. He turned them in the light. Scanning his body too, at first glance he didn't see any wounds on himself, so he could only assume the blood wasn't his. The leather seat groaned as he adjusted, sitting more upright, and the windshield wipers dragged against the dry glass, making a sound much too loud for the quiet depths of the night. The silence in between felt heavy, like someone was watching him from outside the car. Even though he stepped out into the pitch-black night and got around into the driver's seat. Catching his reflection in the rearview mirror, a stranger stared back. Bloodshot eyes, cheeks flushed, skin sallow beneath the day's stubble. He watched his lips part, as if to speak, but no words came. In the passenger seat sat a small brown medicinal bottle, still capped. Beside it, a tape recorder already loaded with a tape, each side labeled Side A Profiles, Side B Evidence. He pressed play, hearing his own voice, flat and tired, filling the cabin of the sedan. Though, for just a heartbeat, he thought he could hear someone else's breath under it. Subject was found staged, deliberate, almost reverent, no signs of struggle, same ritual signature, no prints, same missing item, teeth. We've got nothing except the pattern. Theo's gaze drifted to the medicine bottle. The amber glass caught the cabin light, and for just a moment, it wasn't a bottle at all. It was a staring eye, unblinking. He blinked, and then again, it was just a bottle. The tape crackled. No signs of forced entry. Suspect pool is 0. His jaw clenched. Theo rubbed his temples, and the pain shot down his neck and shoulders. He reached for the amber bottle that rattled when he picked it up. He didn't remember swallowing the last dose, but the bitter taste still lingered in his mouth. The recorder kept talking, but the voice had changed, sounding more manic and guttural. You'll never find me. You don't even know where to begin to look. The sound bled into the cabin like the owner of the voice itself was oozing through the little speaker into the passenger seat. Theo stared at the recorder, the voice that wasn't his, but it carried the weight of his breath, his pauses, like something was wearing his voice as a mask. A flash in the corner of his eye caught his attention, and a shape rippled in the rearview mirror just long enough for him to feel the heat of someone leaning forward from the back seat. The tape warped, voices folding over each other, snarls, whispers, laughter, breaking like a cracked enamel. Theo's hand trembled as he dropped the recorder onto the seat. His tongue flicked feverishly against the teeth, suddenly sharp and unfamiliar, like they didn't belong to him. He was lost in a wash of panicked thought when a sharp rap on the passenger window yanked him back. Deputy Espinosa's eyes were steady through the glass, concern edged with urgency. Theo swallowed hard, his jaw tightening. He forced his breath to slow and even. He clicked the door lock up, and Espinosa opened the door. What do you have for me? Theo asked. Espinosa filled him in on the initial information they had about a situation that was unfolding. It was called in as a possible break-in, but there was something too unusual about it. Theo slid the recorder into his coat pocket, masking the weight like a secret. He rubbed his temples briefly, muscles nodding, but mind sharpening. "Let's go then," Theo sighed to the deputy. As they drove through the dark streets, Theo's eyes scanned everything: the flicker of the street lamps that seemed to pulse, the quiet hum of the city, the faintest signs of anything out of place. The tape's fractured voices echoed faintly in his head, but he locked them away. Now was the moment to focus, to trust his instincts, because despite the shadows clawing at his mind, he was still the detective who could read the silence between screams, and that meant finding the truth. The street was slick with a recent rain, and the faint smell of gasoline and burnt rubber hanging low in the air. Yellow crime scene tape fluttered in the cool night breeze, cordoning off a modest townhouse with shuttered windows. Theo ducked under the tape, Deputy Espinosa close behind. The front door stood ajar, a dark, hollow yawning where it should have fit snugly. At first glance, the place looked ransacked. Drawers were pulled out, cushions tossed on the floor, but something about the chaos didn't sit right. He crouched by the threshold, eyes narrowing. "No signs of forced entry," he murmured, tracing a clean edge along the doorframe. No broken locks, no shattered glass. Espinosa frowned. Could they have had a key? He offered it as a question, more than a statement. Theo's eyes cut to the doormat, unusually undisturbed for a place supposedly broken into. He stepped lightly inside, boots barely making a sound on the hardwood floor. He paused near the living room window. The curtain rod was twisted, but the glass was intact. Someone had clearly tried to force it open, but failed or stopped. Theo's fingers brushed a faint smudge on the wall, not dirty, but a subtle handprint, smaller than his. "Not a burglar," he said softly, eyes scanning the room. His glance landed on a framed photograph on the mantel. A young woman smiling brightly, eyes full of life. He turned to Espinosa. "They got what they came for," he said in a low voice, handing Espinosa the framed photo. He added, "We need to find her, and fast." Theo was crouched near the twisted curtain rod when his radio crackled to life. "Detective Nguyen, HQ here. We've just located a body in a dark alley 3 blocks east of your current location. Female, early 20s, unidentified, but clothing matches a missing persons report filed this morning. Looks like a violent encounter." Espinosa stiffened beside him. Theo's heart tightened. He stood slowly, voice clipped. "Send the coordinates." The radio hissed the location, and Theo tucked the photo into his coat pocket, eyes flickering once more over the living room. A quiet chaos, frozen in time. The alley was a narrow, grim ribbon between the brick buildings, shrouded in shadows. Theo's flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the pale, lifeless form slumped against the damp concrete. His stomach churned, but his eyes caught a flicker of something small and white, glinting faintly beneath her fingers. Kneeling, he reached gently. A single tooth, a molar, cracked at the edges. His breath hitched. The bitter metallic tang returned like the medicine still simmering beneath his skin. Voices whispered again in the edges of his mind, snarling, fractured echoes, teeth gnashing, mouths open, wide and silent. Theo blinked, forcing his gaze back to the scene. The girl's face was peaceful in death, but those missing teeth screamed a silent warning. He swallowed hard, the bitter taste lingering. This wasn't just another victim. Theo held the molar in his hand. It felt heavier than it should have. He stared down at the narrow alley, the shadows pressing in. This was no random act. This was a message, a calling card. His mind raced. The missing teeth from the past victims, the quiet absence. No one else seemed to be able to connect. Espinosa's voice broke through his fog, saying this isn't just a break-in or an isolated attack. It's him. His pattern is clear here. The teeth, the silence. Theo's jaw clenched tight. the pulsing streetlights drawing a migraine in. He's been toying with this neighborhood for months, Theo said, his voice low and steely. No forced entry, no obvious clues, just these missing teeth. It's like he's erasing something, erasing them. He turned back toward the streets, eyes scanning the dark corners, the quiet faces behind the curtained windows. A haze crept into the edges of his mind, whispering doubts, twisting reality, but he pushed it down. This killer was a ghost, a predator who understood silence better than anyone, and Theo would have to become something sharper than fear to catch him. The molar sat in an evidence bag between them on the seat, catching the dashlight with each turn he took. Theo's notebook lay open on his knee, the pages a sprawl of dates, addresses, and names, victims mapped in an invisible net across the district. He drew a quick circle around 3 points clustered near the riverfront. All within a mile radius, he murmured. 16 women, same MO, no witnesses, each missing teeth, different at each time, incisors, molars, premolars. Espinosa kept his eyes on the road, asking, "Do you think he's collecting a full set?" Theo's jaw tightened and answered, "Not collecting, arranging, choosing." The thought chilled him, but it also made sense. Too much sense. "Make the next turn up here," he told Espinosa. "I want to check something out, but first, stop by this shop up here." "The pharmacy?" Espinosa asked for clarity. 15 minutes later, they parked in front of a crumbling boarding house on Lorimer Street, a place that stank of wet brick and rotting wood. The third victim had rented a room here before vanishing. Theo's flashlight beam skimmed over peeling wallpaper, a dent in the banister, and a narrow hallway. In the victim's room, the bed was neatly made, but a cup on the dresser caught his eye. Tea long gone cold, lipstick smudged on the rim. He leaned closer and caught a faint metallic tang in the air. Not blood, something less messy, like copper pennies. When he blinked, the tea in the cup was dark, swirling like oil in water, and then teeth, tiny white shapes clinking against the porcelain. He staggered back, heartbeat thundering. Again, Espinosa's voice pulled him from his daze. "Theo, you good?" Espinosa's voice was somewhere far away. Theo straightened, forcing his face blank. Yeah, just thinking," he answered. But in his mind, the image stayed. Teeth in the cup, perfectly arranged. He could see the pattern now, the logic behind each missing tooth. And as he understood it, something inside him shifted, as though the pattern was his to finish. They stepped back out into the hall. Rain tapped against the warped window at the end, the sound sharp and quick like fingernails. "I'm going to go check something out," Theo said. Espinosa started to follow him, but Theo cut him a look, almost barking. "Just give me 5 minutes." The deputy hesitated, then nodded and ducked outside to radio in their findings. Theo moved deeper into the boarding house, past rooms that hadn't seen tenants in years. The air thickened, heavy with mildew, dust, and decay. He stopped at a door halfway down. The knob turned in his palm. Inside, the room was stripped bare except for a small wooden chair in the center. On the seat, another cup, porcelain with a hairline crack spidering out from the rim. He crouched. Inside the cup were 2 teeth, roots still faintly stained with blood. Theo took from his pocket an amber bottle, cracked the seal, filled the dropper, and dispensed it under his tongue. His mind folded in a haze, muting the edges of the world. His hand shook as he reached for the teeth. For a split second, the teeth weren't teeth at all, but smooth, glistening stones, warm, as though they had been in their rightful place just moments ago. "You keep finding me." A voice breathed low and close. Theo spun around, but the doorway was empty. A shiver crawled up his spine, but instead of fear, he felt an odd wave of satisfaction, as though he and the killer were playing the same game, as though he knew the next move. The teeth in his pocket now felt heavy. The bare room smelled of damp wood and something faintly chemical. Theo's light skimmed over the floorboards until it hit a scrap of paper wedged beneath a chair leg. He pried it free, a takeout menu, worn soft at the folds. The name at the top was scrawled in red ink. Pomodoros. It was the type of flyers local businesses would send out mass mailed. An address was printed neatly below. To current resident, miles away from the river district. Theo stared at it, a slow current running under his skin. This was the first real thing he had touched in months that felt like it pointed somewhere, and not just anywhere. Home. Outside, rain hissed on the pavement. Espinosa was waiting by the cruiser, radio still in hand. "I've got one more angle I want to check," Theo said, slipping the menu into his coat pocket. "It's probably nothing, but I'll sleep better if I can rule it out." Espinosa raised a brow. "You want me to—" he started, but Theo cut him off. No, go ahead, head on home, and I'll file it if it's worth anything." The deputy didn't press. He had learned long ago that Theo was married to the job. Theo's own car coughed to life, wipers pushing back the blur of the night as he cut across the city towards the far suburbs. Street lamps gave way to quiet lawns and hedges trimmed too neatly, every porch light a little too warm. He pulled to the curb outside 1249 Hawthorne Lane, a pale, two-story building with lace curtains. The air here was still, but heavy, a tension you could chew. He dispensed another dropperful of the amber bottle under his tongue. He cut off the wipers, his windshield morphing into a grotesque mirror, reflecting a distorted view of himself. Through the rain-streaked windows, he saw a car approach the house and pull into the narrow driveway. A man about the same height and build as Theo stepped out from the car, put a key into the side door of the house, and walked in. Theo couldn't help but notice he had a similar coat, and the man seemed to have a similar limp that Theo had himself since the war. He reached for his sidearm. The weight was real, grounding him enough to crack the door and slide out into the night air. He stayed low and stuck to the shadows. He wanted to get a good look at this killer that he had been hunting and chasing for 5 years now. He could see the man's figure moving around the house, shadows gliding past the windows. He creeped closer to the house, now on the porch. A creak underfoot made him and the man stand frozen where they were. After holding his position and breath for what felt like hours, the man in the house moved on, going about his evening routine. Theo eased back off the porch and went to peer into the windows of the sedan in the driveway. He was thinking how this guy must have gotten some kicks off of it, or may have even been using the vehicle to lure his victims. Theo couldn't see any markings on it, but it was the same make and model he drove for the PD, a Ford Custom 300. Sicko must have gotten it from an auction, Theo thought to himself, but that thought was quickly pushed out. Peering into the passenger side window, in the seat, he saw a tape recorder and notepad. The floorboard was littered with amber medicine bottles. He felt his hand wrap around his own in his pocket. He made his way to the back of the house, hoping for a window with the curtains open so he could get a peek inside, but no luck. Circling back to the driveway, considering how best to approach this, he noticed a side door. All the windows near it were dark. He tested the knob and it turned easily. Theo took a deep breath and quietly stepped into the house, his breath heavy. He tried to steady it. Once inside, he blinked furiously, trying to get his eyes to adjust. The darkness wasn't complete. Faint strips of light leaked through from somewhere down the hall, bending around the door frames. Theo stood still, letting the silence swell until he could hear the watch ticking in his own pocket. The air smelled of lemon oil, aftershave, and the same metallic odor he had noticed in the dilapidated building in the riverfront district. His eyes adjusted by degrees. A coat hung by the door, his size, his cut. A pair of boots sat beneath it, scuffed, and showing extra wear on the right foot from the limp in the man's gait. similar to Theo's. He moved deeper into the house. The layout unfolded like a memory. 2 steps forward, turned left into the kitchen. Without thinking, his hand found the switch for the under-cabinet light. It buzzed faintly to life, casting a soft glow over a chipped mug on the counter. Steam still curled from its lip. No one was here. Room after room, each detail tugged at something deep in him. A lamp he was certain he had owned years ago. A stack of records in the same order he kept them in. The faint scent of the tobacco blend he smokes. Upstairs, the hall stretched longer than it should have. The shadows cast seemed to stretch and bend with no concern of relation to the light spilling into the hall. Doors on either side seemed to breathe in the dim light. At the end, the bathroom door hung half open, and he pushed it wide. A pedestal sink stood under a narrow medicine cabinet mirror. At first, he thought the basin was filled with little pebbles. Then, as he stepped closer, he could see the roots, teeth, dozens of them, more than they had victims for. His reflection stared back at him from the mirror, not quite his face. The skin stretched tight, mouth too wide, gaps where his teeth should be. His eyes were the worst of it, wide set and bulging, unblinking, the look of something that had determination to finish its course. Behind the glass, the reflection moved closer, though he stood feet planted. The basin creaked under his weight as he leaned in, the mirror catching the dim lamplight. Water splashed cool across his face, rivulets slipping down his jaw over the slight stubble that had grown in over the past week. He reached for the amber bottle without looking, fingers knowing the way. The bottle joined the others in the cabinet, a neat little row, labels curling at the edges, all half empty. He crossed into the hall, to the bedroom, took his wallet from his pocket, and carefully removed a small key from one of its folds. He moved to the far side of the room, removing a large wooden box from a shelf. The key slid effortlessly into the lock. He opened the top of the box, revealing several rows of neatly laid out teeth, each labeled with an address and a date. He took the 2 teeth from his own pocket, number 31 and 32. Theo's eyes met those of his reflection in the dresser mirror. A calm, steady contentedness washed over him, and his mouth curled into a wicked grin. All right, friend, Theo's journey reminds us that it's the smallest details, what we feel, what we notice, what we ignore, can have enormous consequences. Mindful skill number 5 isn't just a practice, it's a shield. Observing without judgment, noticing patterns before they spiral, recognizing our own instincts before they're hijacked. Pause, look around, check in with yourself. In the silence between moments, there's clarity and maybe safety. If you like this spooky story and you haven't seen my other 4, make sure to head on over to my page so you can binge them all. And make sure to subscribe so you don't miss next week. I don't have any teasers for you right now because I'm still kind of feeling that out, but it will definitely be worth the watch. Friend, thank you so much for sharing a piece of your day with me. Stay present, stay kind to yourself, and I will see you soon.